and welcome to AFP. My name is Devang, I'm joined this week by Sean K. On today's show, we chat a wild MLS Cup final, more league news, Champions League, CONCACAF Champions League, plus, oh yeah, the World Cup is just a few days away, and we tackle the mailbag on another edition of Ask AFP. Holy cow, Sean, we are into the crucible that is November. Somehow the World Cup is just in front of us, plus we wrapped up an incredible MLS season with arguably the best cup final of all time. There's a lot going on.
What a week this past was, and then looking forward, how incredible it's about to become. Like, I still can't believe that we're weeks away from Canada playing a World Cup game. Something that I don't think I'd ever thought I was going to utter. So it's incredible. Like, at what point are you going to like amp up your, not support, but like your understanding that the World Cup is about to show? Or have you already like turned your amplifier on and you're like, it's World Cup season?
I think I'm there. It is a bit different though. It wasn't because Sepp Blatter was like, hey guys, I think we made a mistake with this whole thing going to Qatar. That was not what made me a little apprehensive, but I do think the fact that this is in the winter and there is that spectrum of club play still happening, and every game that happens is like, well, I hope no one gets hurt, because we've already seen, of course, Max Crepeau being maybe the best example of, oh God, I can't believe that happened. So it's a bit of a weird place right now where I'm excited, but I'm also anxious. And then I'm also remembering everything else that goes into the reason this World Cup is happening now. So I am super excited. I have been doing my homework, but it does definitely feel different. And it's made some of these club games a bit different to me as well. Like, I'm no Spurs fan, Sean, you know that, but I love South Korea and I love their soccer team.
Yeah.
And when Sonny got hurt, I was devastated because that's all I could think of. It wasn't about the game against Leeds coming up. It was about, is he going to be fit for this?
Yeah, it's this weird sort of period of time where all you're doing is just hoping that these like marquee players and these players who've been waiting their entire lives get the opportunity to live that dream out, and seeing it go both ways is it's just shocking to that. Once again, there's so much wrong with what this World Cup is about, but like, I think right now, or the last like 2 weeks, has really shown that like these players are not going to be coming in. Well, they might be coming in at the quote unquote peak of their athletic and like soccer ability, but I think from their like how like tight their bodies are and how like ability to like break, because they've been used so much over this last 18 months, that it's going to be very interesting to see how this World Cup is remembered, if it's the injury World Cup or if it's the World Cup. But injuries are going to be very, very looked at with a microscope over the next couple of weeks. And I wish it wasn't the case.
Me too. And you're right. Like, I think the charitable way of looking at this is usually the World Cups happen after everyone is super tired after a full season. But when you add everything together, including the Pandy year, the closed door year, and the condensed schedule that has resulted in it, it's a lot of games. So we will be on the lookout. Should note, David Goss, the legend, not available today because he was in LA for that euphoric MLS Cup, and then he went to Disney World, Sean, which I think is part of what you're supposed to do following a win. So I guess we can say that David was on LAFC in some way.
Yeah, when you're a champion, you celebrate like a champion, and that's going to Disney. So if he's up on Space Mountain right now, or listening to this while he's on Space Mountain, hope you have a great fall, David. But we'll miss you. We'll see you next week.
We'll see you next week. I think he's in Disneyland too. I want to correct that, because he wouldn't fly from LA to Orlando, right? That couldn't be true.
You don't know. He's
talked about
David Gass is a baller. He's a baller. He might be like, no, I don't need that LA Disney. Give me the real deal in Florida. You know how much he loves Florida too.
It's true. It's that Delta counter knows him by first name. They're like, to Florida, sir? And he says, yes, please. Fantastic. Before we get to today's show, a reminder, we're on patreon.com/a football podcast. Sean, we've talked about this Discord for a while now, but if in case our dear listeners aren't enlightened, what do they get once they join us on patreon.com?
Well, they get episodes ad-free. They get episodes a day early. So we record, and then in a couple hours, you get the episode. So that's a huge one. And then once again, you get the Discord, where if it's an MLS Cup, you have me just shouting about Gareth Bale for 130 minutes, or you get other people with real insights. And then with World Cup that's about to happen, like I'm assuming that it's going to be absolutely on fire for Canada games, for US games, for almost every single game. I think the fact that the morning is just going to be full of soccer for everyone. I think that especially in this world where people quote unquote work during the World Cup, I think it's going to be a place where people are going to really have a fun time. So yeah, that's once again, we talk about all these great things, but Discord's creating a really nice family, and it's great to be a part of it.
Those 5 a.m. games, you can guarantee someone on the Discord will be chatting about it. So head on over to patreon.com/a football podcast and join us today when we come back. Boy, oh boy, big game Bale, Sean K, Nostradamus. We talk about that all coming up next.
Looking, throws it on the ground to Elias Sanchez on the far side. LAFC trailing 3-2. Tiki dragging into the end line. Palacios keeps it in play. To Bale in the middle.
An incredible moment, a moment that the first thing I thought of was you, Sean K, the number one Gareth Bale fan, the one person who believed that he would make a difference in this game. In my other line of work, I was doing some World Cup preview stuff and previewing Wales's group and talking about the fact that we're not quite sure where his fitness is at, and if he's healthy, you could pretty much expect him to show up in the big games, but that health and where he was at was the big question. It wasn't like he started either, SK. And the fact that he wasn't even the first choice off the bench either was a bit of a sign as well that perhaps you were right to be a bit apprehensive in putting too much on big game Bale. But holy cow, what a moment.
As the ultimate Gareth Bale stan, it really sent a lot of questions through my mind through like the first, 80 some odd, 90 minutes of just why isn't he coming into the game? What is going on? What has happened in the last few months that Gareth Bale can't even show up in the game where he delivers the best? And then finally he gets on the pitch. And I'll be honest, I watched him, I focused on him, and I was really worried because I felt like he was coming on the pitch and almost walking around because he was afraid of getting injured. And I was like, oh no. But when you need an iconic moment, a defining moment, a moment where you need a hero, Gareth Bale will show up and will deliver.
Yeah.
I know it's something that I've been retweeting from a few Gareth Bale Twitter accounts over the last week, but there has been 20 plus games in the dying minutes where he has scored out of nowhere. And it's just something that's just in his DNA where he can just find himself in these moments. And it's incredible. It is absolutely mind-boggling.
What gets me is I think the end of the Real Madrid stint and how weird it was, and the fact that it seemed like he was banished for a while, it really clouded his skill and his class at times. But they had that qualifying campaign in which he had to show up against Austria, then against Ukraine in that scenario. And he did, and he consistently does. And I think of all the things that you can say about him as a player, what a remarkable achievement to have beside your name that you can count on him to supply the impossible. I mean, he's towering over Jack Elliott. He's towering over the guy who is causing them problems on the other end. It was just an iconic moment in a really great game. And if DG was here, I think he would agree. But I don't want to be we got to convert the masses, and this is more about this game, and it's not about selling the product, because I think we should just let it speak for itself. But I had multiple people who are non-MLS fans, SK, reach out and say, holy hell, this was an advertisement. A lot of people were tuning in, more than I thought, but I should have known the two best teams. I think I underestimated perhaps the pull that this game would have, and boy, did it deliver. I think that the mistakes we saw, the bad luck, the Kellen Acosta goal, which was just expertly headed in by his own player, Jack McGlynn, and then everything that happened afterwards. It's just a really, really fun match if you're a neutral. I can't imagine how you feel if you're a Philly fan, though.
Oh, yeah, it's definitely a kick in the teeth if you're a Philly fan. But yeah, just to go on what you were saying, like I think it was really good in the sense that it was even a slow build. Like the first 45, wasn't like must-watch soccer, but it was sort of that thing where like as it just started to snowball, more people started telling other people to turn on the TV and see what's happening, and it's going to get exciting. And it is like, it just crescendoed at the perfect time. And it was the greatest MLS Cup I think I've ever seen. I think the only other one that I was this emotionally invested to a neutral game was the Dwayne De Rosario overtime golden goal winner, where he curled it in the back. Because once again, it was just such an exceptional moment. That one, like Landon Donovan was playing, he was the hot player at the moment. D-Row coming off the bench, it was good. But yeah, this one just brought everything, and it's something that's really spectacular about LAFC, and I don't know how they continue to do it. But anytime that their light is shone on them, they deliver, even when they lose. It's 4-3, 5-2. It's incredible. And I think the thing that we'll talk about a little bit later that you can't get lost in is the Max Crepeau through his entire career out the window. Like once again, I'm not trying to blow this out, but he did whatever it needed to be for that goal to not go in or that breakaway to be a goal chance. And he kept this team in the game and did whatever he could. And without that, I think Philadelphia is the champion.
Think about this. So that happens, which our hearts go out to the 28-year-old from Cadillac, Quebec. Because you said it well, Sean. I can't imagine what's going through his head right now, but at the time there was no doubt, and that's what makes him who he was. And the fact that in the lead up to this game, he was talking about making that decision to go to LFC and leaving his comfort zone for something bigger and embracing the spotlight that comes with being part of this traveling circus that is LAFC, that entertains everyone no matter where they go. He was part of that, and coming on with Corey Burke doing the only thing he knew what to do, ending that way, terrible. But then John McCarthy comes in, and he's in the shootout, and he wins the shootout for them. It's just the scenes of Bale FaceTiming with Crepeau from the ambulance, that made me emotional. Reading some of the Canadian team comments from Bahrain in their camp, talking about Max and talking about losing Scott Kennedy as well earlier as well, and just how affected they were by losing a teammate, someone that's been with them throughout this whole journey. It's, if anything I take from this, it's that exactly what you said, Sean. That's who he is. He's not going to sell out and leave Corey Burke to go score the winning goal. That's not who he is. He's going to sacrifice his body, and it's a shame that he's going to miss it on this World Cup, but he is one of the reasons why they are lifting that trophy, and he'll go down as a club legend for it. Of course, anytime a team wins, we immediately go into what comes next because the world never stops. But there's the Bale question. There's the Jose Cifuentes question. I think Cifuentes is probably gone. That seems like that is going to happen. But I think Bale comes back, Sean. I don't know about you.
I don't know with Gareth Bale. I don't know what is next for him. He obviously has a contract to see out, but I also don't know what is going to motivate him anymore. I think he's hit the pinnacle. He's won Major League Soccer. It's something that he's wanted to do his entire career. But he's hitting the pinnacle of bringing Wales to the World Cup. He's going to compete in it. He's scored the game-tying goal in an iconic fashion. He sort of always looked at at the end of the World Cup to be like, okay, I'll relook at my career. And I just don't know what his motivation is after him basically being at Real Madrid, winning all these cups, going to the World Cup, and then looking down and just being like, should I just enjoy my private life and walk away? So I don't know about Gareth Bale. He's a bit of an enigma that way. CF Fuentes, I agree. I think that he is gone. It'll be interesting to see how this all falls out post World Cup and what his value is. I think he's got a year left in his contract, so it can't be too high. However, if there's multiple bidders and whatever the silly season becomes in January, that's a huge question for Major League Soccer or the world, is how aggressive is January going to be post World Cup? But yeah, you've got to assume that it's his time to make the big move.
So Gareth Bale has an option, but if they pick it up, he becomes a DP, which you should argue, how is he not a DP already? But that's a conversation for another day. The other thing is that the whole Vela thing, him playing with Vela, didn't exactly work that well. So I think they might have to bring that into account as well if he does turn into a DP. So perhaps, maybe I should hold my horses there. CF Fuentes, I mean, he's going to the World Cup, right? He'll play with Ecuador. The spotlight will shine even higher. Tom Bogert wrote this on MLSsoccer.com, but he's the reason this U22 initiative exists, right? Like, this is a great example of someone who's not a DP, but will be one of the players that you look back on and say, yeah, he started at MLS, and that's a great story, I think, for them. But I think Ryan Hollingshead is a free agent. Mendez, Escobar, out of contract. Latif Blessing, contract option. Cullen Acosta, contract option. I think he's going to make the World Cup squad, so that has bearings on that. There will be some turnover there, but pretty confident in this organization to retool, Sean. They have the resources, they have the means, they have the attractiveness of being LAFC, and now a cup winner. I don't even think they needed the cup winning fact to attract people, but they have that now as well.
No, I think you're completely right. I think that they've shown that they can sort of retool. They can lose big pieces. Like, they lost the best defender in the league after a couple seasons and still come back year after year and been an elite team. So I have no problem. It'll just be interesting to see where all these people land, because I would assume that there are people around Major League Soccer that's sort of circling like hawks. Like, Latif Blessing is somebody that if I was Toronto FC...
If Latif Blessing does not come to TFC, Sean, I'll eat a boot. I said I was going to eat a boot last time for Carlos Gonzalez winning Coach of the Year. I'll do it this time.
Completely. Like, I think he's a guy that's going to track lots of the field, work alongside Mark-Anthony Kaye, who he's worked with before. I think that he's going to be in the conversation. Now, if Latif wants warm weather or whatever, we'll see. But it would shock me if Bob's not knocking on that door.
Philadelphia, all week.
Yeah.
Everyone singing the praises about the lowest salaries in the league and the construction of this team, and a team led by Chucky from Rugrats, leading the way in such an impressive fashion. To come so close and fall this way sucks, obviously. I don't need to say that. The Phillies lost 2. The Eagles are still undefeated. But where do they go from here, Shawnee? I think this team, how different will they look?
Yeah, it's an interesting conversation. Like, obviously, Wagner is going to make the move. That has been discussed to death.
Paxton as well.
Yeah. But once again, I think that this is a team that has continually rebuilt over the last few years, especially with the youth movement in their squad. I think that they'll be okay. I think that they have a really good spine, and they have the best goalkeeper in Major League Soccer, and that will go a long way. If you can keep your spine together and have that goalkeeper, they'll be fine. Now, will they continue at this pace? Maybe not, but once again, maybe they'll see or have the opportunity to invest back into the club again, right?
Yeah.
They've seen a lot of dollars go into the Aaronsons. And the other thing that I will say in all this is that, and this really sucks, but Alejandro Bedoya missed the final and he missed the semifinal. He walked out injured, 45 minutes into it. But I think that he would have really helped this team, especially because Martinez had a real tough game in that midfield. It just didn't seem like he could ever get settled. He lot of missed passes, a lot of the penalty shot was poor. Like, it just wasn't his game, and I felt like Bedoya was always the guy that was going to make that midfield tick, and it was just a shame that he had to miss.
100%. Final news and notes regarding this final. A viewership record. I believe this was the second highest viewership rating ever for MLS Cup, the highest in 25 years. 2.1 million. That's a great number over that. People messaging me, I think this crossed over into other sports. There was a huge college football game on. I think it was Georgia, Tennessee. People weren't watching that. It was a blowout as well. But I think the fact that they went up against some pretty huge games elsewhere and they still drew that number on Fox is really, really promising. Also promising, Maxime Crepeau, successful surgery after breaking that leg. That's great news. Hope he comes back when he's ready, and I would love to watch a few games with him this World Cup. I think that'd be great viewing as he's going nuts watching from home, but we wish him all the best elsewhere.
Oh boy.
Incredible news coming out of Montreal. Matt V on the Discord alerting us to this. Sam Stexjal confirming a report out of Montreal. This is from Jeremy Filosa, who's a French reporter there. Apparently, Wilf Nancy and club owner Joey Saputo got into an altercation after Montreal lost to SKC in July. There were concerns among the staff and players that he wouldn't even finish 2022 with the team, which that happened in July. If anything, this underlines just how damn good Wilf Nancy is at his job to maintain this professionalism. But I'm getting some real bad owner vibes from the situation. And as Sam states, this crew interest and the fact that the Columbus crew are interested in taking him from Montreal makes a lot of sense with this in mind.
Yeah. Two things on this. Number one, like, I started hearing whispers of this a couple weeks ago, but like, the fact that it happened in the middle of the summer and it's only coming out now is really impressive from a Montreal front office standpoint. It's just that it never leaked.
But so this is the question, Sean. Why now and who leaked that? Because the cynic in me is saying that this is the Nazi camp being like, listen, Montreal fans, I love you guys, but this situation is untenable. You all know this. You've been following this team for a long time, but I just want to make it clear why I'm leaving, and this is one of the reasons.
Yeah, completely. It's definitely coming from Wilf Nancy's camp or somebody in and around that, just because, it gives a reason and an opportunity for him to take a better move. It's really disappointing. Once again, like, this CF Montreal team was a bright spot in the Canadian soccer scene this year. They were playing incredible soccer. They were bringing up local talent, whether it be your Alistair Johnson or your Kones, or even, like, once again, they bought in on Jordi Mihalovic, who is came from Chicago, and they bought in and were like, this is going to be our guy. Like, they were a real MLS built club. And they did it so well and looked so good doing it. And Wilf looked so good behind Montreal. And it just was working so well. So what the hell is Joey Saputo doing?
SK, here's the sad part. This is not surprising at all.
No, it's not.
This is pretty much, if you were to do like a connect the dots or like fill in the blanks with an MLS team, kind of treating a great situation and going sideways with it, I would have guessed this. I would have exactly guessed this. It pains me that we are right with this speculation, and we were right that it didn't seem like things were all well behind the scenes. But who knows? At this point, I'd be stunned if he wasn't a Columbus Crew coach by this time next week.
Yeah, well, I definitely think that there must be conversations in multiple clubs across Major League Soccer with openings, and maybe this came out at around the time of Houston. We'll talk about Ben Olsen later,
right? But
I wonder if he was involved in a few conversations and was trying to lobby to see which one was better and put this out into the world. But yeah, I don't know. It's really disappointing because it felt like the fans were back on, the supporters were back on, the city was back together, and if Wilf Nancy leaves, and Alistair Johnson goes. They've lost Jordi Mihailovic. Kone is going to go. Like, they're going to be left with Sam Piet, who just re-upped, and a B squad. I'm worried about Montreal again, which just sucks because 3 weeks ago you're talking about how they're the like prime competitors to win MLS Cup 2023 if they do things right with Wolf Nancy.
At least you'll be welcome back into your TFC supporters family, Sean, now that you've spoken the truth about Montreal. From Montreal, you mentioned Ben Olsen, officially introduced as the new coach of the Houston Dynamo. You don't talk about Houston that much because, I mean, they're quite far away, but in the context of the league, we haven't had reason to talk about them that much. I will say Ben Olsen is not the most inspiring hire, but he knows this league really well. I don't know necessarily if that has been their problem, though. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think I like Pat Onstad being there, but I don't know if knowing the league necessarily has been an issue so much so that you go with a lifer again. But maybe I'm wrong here. I do like Ben Olsen, the coach, generally, but that's more vibes based than tactics.
Yeah. I'm interested. I'll say this nicely. I'm interested to see what Ben Olsen can do at a different club. For all that is great historically about DC United, the last 10 years of DC United has been shambles. So for him to even have a good resume with being with DC United, a team that has just been historically just been mismanaged, okay, let's just see him at Houston. And yeah, I think the relationship with Pat Onstad does really help the group, because traditionally when managers and head coaches are on the same page, there's at least a collective idea of what is about to happen, and they can work together towards that. And something that David Goss has said is if you have an identity, that's step one, and that's better than 5, 6, 7, 8 Major League Soccer teams. So if they can go ahead and do that, and you've got yourself a few decent players, you've got Hector Herrera who's sitting there waiting to go.
Right.
So it'll be interesting. I'm interested to see what Ben Olsen can do. Is it sexy? No. But is it a cohesive vision from Onstad to Olsen through the front office and an idea of how they're going to play? Maybe. So I'll give it a chance. Am I crazy here?
No, I'm with you. I'd like to see Houston be good again. It'd be cool if all the Texas teams were relevant, and they're close. They're very close. So here's hoping Ben Olsen gets it done in Houston. We conclude with some news out of Vancouver. Former Team Canada and Vancouver Whitecaps women's soccer coach Bob Burrata has been sentenced to 2 years less a day, consisting of 16 months of jail time, followed by 8 months of house arrest. Judge Deanne Gaffer described the case as involving a trusted member of the soccer coaching community who violated the sexual integrity of youthful and promising players, with impacts and devastation continuing to this day. Powerful statement by the judge and powerful statements by the victims, quoting from a CBC article that shows the charges don't relate to single incidents of bad judgment. If there's any other player out there who was mistreated by him, I want them to know it's not their fault. A second victim saying the victims in this case were teenage members of select BC soccer teams, which should have been a place of personal growth and development, but instead became a place of sexual violence with life-altering consequences. I'm glad to see this sentence. I don't want him near young women or in the sport of soccer, but I think there's a larger issue we need to address. I thought that last statement, Sean, of the entire thing is powerful, but I think that last statement really hit home. This has been a black eye for the organization. We talked about a lot of things that have gone poorly for them off the pitch, but nothing as serious as this.
Yeah. I don't know if it's enough. I don't know fully if it's going to provide closure to victims, whatever, but it's a start, and the community needs to be better in reacting and listening and understanding, and not trying to look out for their best interests, and just look out for people. Yeah. It just needs to come back to, at the end of the day, we need to protect our people.
There was one story I read, especially that, this guy was telling a player that on her 18th birthday, he was going to have sex with her and referred to it as ecstasy day. And this woman literally quit soccer on her 18th birthday to get away from him, who was 40 at the time. I mean, what do you say? Simply awful. A position of trust betrayed. I hope this sentence provides some sort of closure for the victims, but I know that's not for me to say, and that's for them to decide. But I think this case, like that statement indicated, is not isolated. There's others like this, and like you said, Sean, this collective trust and this fact that we all love soccer, we're celebrating soccer, and we're about to celebrate the game of soccer for a whole month because Canada is involved in the World Cup. These incidents will be probably distant memories when we get there, but they shouldn't be. We should keep them in the forefront because they keep happening. And until we acknowledge that, then they will never stop. When we come back after the break, we move on to the UCL, the World Cup, CONCACAF Champions League, all of that coming up next. Welcome back to AFP. We went through MLS. Now let's move across the pond to some Champions League action, some CCL action, and the World Cup beginning in Europe. SK. We've got the draw for the round of 16. Big matches for the Canadians. PSG, Messi, Neymar, Mbappe against Bayern Munich and Alphonso Davies. I would just like to say that announcement from Bayern regarding Alphonso Davies' health, Sean, was one of the strangest things I've seen ever put out by a club, in which they were like, don't worry, everyone, he'll be fit for the World Cup. We're almost positive. I've never seen that before.
No, it was a bizarre one in the sense that, like, it wasn't good news for the football club, but they wanted to assure Canada that everything's okay for the World Cup.
The admin was like, I am being harassed by upset Canadian fans. I need to set the record straight. But yeah, I mean, that's comforting. That's all we all needed, but it did feel like it was just kind words. Well, I'll believe it when I see it. But that matchup was juicy. Stefan Eustáquio and Porto.
Is it ever?
Yeah, I'll just run through and then we'll talk maybe about which one we like the most. But Porto, Stefan Eustáquio, I believe he scored again today as we record this. They're playing Inter Milan. And then Club Brugge, arguably the surprise of the whole tournament, is in the round of 16. They'll play Benfica, another surprise who won their group. A good draw for Bruges, but that's Tejan Buchanan, Kyle Larin there. Some juicy stuff. Part of me, I'm obviously excited to see Fonzie versus those PSG folks, but Stefan Eustáquio, by the time we get to the Champions League this stage, Sean, I wonder what his profile is going to be. It might be of someone who is one of those guys in the midfield worldwide who is known by all.
I sure hope so, because that means that Canada has made a mark in the international space in the World Cup. But I agree. It's been really reassuring to my soccer IQ ego to see Stefan Eustáquio do so well in such a prestigious tournament, because you watch him play in CONCACAF and you just see the class that he has and how he's just an elite level player at that level. And so when you saw him struggle, or not struggle, but had an opportunity to get minutes last year, but wasn't really cracking Porto. But then this year, it's just like, it's a completely different player. He's scoring goals. He's setting up goals. And from a player that is a little bit deeper lying than you'd expect to score all these goals. But yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see him post World Cup and see, if he is a poster boy for Porto. And yeah, you're even seeing in Transfer Market, the website, I think he's up $3 or $4 million in his value already. So it's, hey man, as somebody who goes on that site way too much.
Your addiction to the Transfer Market fees, Sean, we need to have it too much.
I love it.
They're not real. They're not real, man. They're not real.
Doesn't matter. You need to value.
It's true. It's true. I will say there's a bit of Granit Xhaka in Stefan Eustáquio in terms of his goal scoring prowess.
Stop this podcast. Stop this podcast. All right,
I'll stop.
Completely stop.
I will say Club Brugge, Sean. Club Brugge, Tejan back healthy. That's wonderful to see. Kyle Larin, though, settling in very nicely. To put on my Canada hat, that team kind of ramping it up and playing super well. I really like what that means for those guys specifically in terms of confidence and feeling good, because through injury and not playing, we definitely did not have those vibes early on.
Yeah, completely. I think it's nice to see them turn the corner. Obviously, getting Tejan back and also playing a bit more of that fullback role, which we had sort of discussed him playing for Canada, especially in the Belgium game. It's definitely good to see them back playing week in and week out. And we'll get into this a little bit later, but I'm confused on where Tejan / the right back conversation goes for Canada in the 11.
We'll get there in a second. More Champions League, this time closer to home. The 2023 CCL draw unveiled. Orlando City getting horribly CONCACAF'd in their first taste of it. Welcome to the show, guys. They got to play Tigres and then probably Pachuca in the next round. Vancouver Whitecaps playing a Honduras team, Real España, then probably LAFC, though Alajuelense has a bunch of Costa Rica national team players on it, so they'll be very tough. The Union getting Alianza from El Salvador, and Austin FC getting Violet from Haiti, I believe. Thoughts on the draws? I mean, Whitecaps could have been much worse.
Yeah, I from a putting on my Rob Lowe MLS hat on, that one side of the bracket is really tasty because you're going to probably get a Major League Soccer club in the final again.
Do you rate Atlas that much?
Traditionally, no, they're not like a monster in Liga MX, but I would. I'm not here to tell you that I'm watching week in and week out, so I wouldn't be giving false advertising to it. But I'm just saying, with one Liga MX team in there and seeing the powerhouse that is LAFC, Philadelphia, and I guess the Vancouver Whitecaps in there, your chances see that, like, I think LAFC, well, like, it would not shock me if we see an MLS Cup final in the semifinals of the CONCACAF Champions League. Gareth Bale, CONCACAF Champions League winner.
Happening.
It's happening.
It's happening. Book it. Can't wait for that. A lot of tournament action, so much soccer, but that's post World Cup, so we'll tackle that when it comes. Speaking of the World Cup, I mentioned that Davies hamstring strain. Again, the report from Bayern, he's not going to miss the World Cup games. We'll see. Like, I think we'll have to see literally as we get closer to that Belgium game. But it's a hamstring, so
yeah.
Forgive me for not feeling that confident. Like, he's had some issues with it before. Bayern has been playing him in situations that I don't necessarily think he's had to play in, and some dead rubbers in the Champions League as well. But, I mean, what do you say, Sean? It's like, well, just gotta hope. Physio and everything works.
Yeah, like, and this is the other thing about Alfonso is that he has been, I wouldn't call it injury prone lately, but he has had a few injuries. But something about him is that he always does seem to come back a little bit quicker than your traditional method. So I don't know, once again, what that is and why that is. Sports science, the makeup of his body, what have you. But he seems to always be ahead. And so I'm going to just hope and trust Bayern Munich's sports science and PR team that he is going to be fine and that he is going to be ready for Belgium, and just pretend that injury never happened. Because I think that
deal.
Worrying about it is only going, like, they've said he's okay. He's going to be okay. So worrying about it is just going to make you stressed for no reason. So that's my take on it.
The whole timeline on Saturday before, I mean, Twitter was already melting down for various reasons, not relating at all to Canada soccer, but I definitely thought Twitter would just go down in flames based on the Vonsi talk overriding the servers and their lack of workers after everyone was fired. I thought that was the end of Twitter.
There was a lot of conversation around Alfonso Davies, and don't get me wrong, but there was also a few like side think pieces where I was like, this isn't the right time or conversation being like, well, it's better that it's Alphonso Davies than Steven Eustáquio because Steven Eustáquio is more important to the team. And I'm like, okay, pull that one back for a second. Number one, let's not pick and choose who's injured and who isn't. And second of all, this is one of the best 11 players in the entire world. Let's not like downgrade him because he doesn't play center midfield. But yeah, you got to go through the emotions. And we talked about this off the top of the show. Injuries are going to happen a lot right now. Messi was out this weekend. Like everyone is probably walking on eggshells and everyone is afraid. And clubs are probably trying to figure out how to keep their players happy and not injured. But gosh, it's crazy right now.
The fascinating thing about the Bayern and stuff is that they're paying Fonzie's bill, like their wages, right? Like he's their player, and that's what it's all about, really, for them. But I think even they have the wherewithal to acknowledge that for him, this is obviously a huge deal, and for the millions of us cheering for Canada, it's a huge deal as well. So I think that makes it for the maybe unorthodox PR statement.
Yeah, and I think another thing that, like, yes, full stop. The employer of the team needs results on the field. And of course, but an employer of the team also needs happy players. And with the way that the transfer market is and demands and all these kind of things are, you gotta keep your guys happy because they'll put in a transfer request in 2 weeks and they'll go to another team. Like if Alphonso Davies is being trotted out week in and week out because like half injured before the World Cup, like you're going to ruin a relationship.
Yeah. It's well said. We will keep that vigil going as we get closer to the opening game. Please be okay. Speaking of, that roster for Canada will be revealed November 13th. I believe that's Sunday. They're in Bahrain right now. 26 players, right, Sean? I believe that's the number. Expanded from that normal 23. Max Crepeau, obviously, no longer in contention, but of the many questions, who's going to be that third keeper after Milan Borjan and Dane St. Clair? Is it James Pantemis? Is it Thomas Hasal, who got brought into that Bahrain camp? Who are you leading?
I just by the pecking order and knowing all this, you got to assume it's Pantemis. Just he got the call to this Bahrain camp as the fourth keeper. So you've got to assume that he is the guy that's going to come in there.
Hear me out. Strictly by age, I would bring Hasal because he's slightly younger. And if I'm looking at 2026 and seeing who could be in the conversation, then he probably will be.
I understand. I understand that reasoning. I just worry about freak accidents. And I understand the third keeper.
If either of them have to play, something horrible has happened, though, right? Like
completely. All I'm saying is that you've got yourself one very experienced keeper now, and then a roster of unexperienced young keepers. Like I like Dane St. Clair. I think he's an incredible keeper, but he is going to be completely out of his element to play a World Cup game. And I'm not saying that Pantemis is going to be a gamer. He's got the same experience as Dane St. Clair. But Thomas Hasal might not be the starting goalkeeper for the Vancouver. Like, I think there's a big gap there. So anyway, all I'm saying is I'm worried going in because with Max you had a second hand that if Milan got injured, came out and got like something, there was a sure hand there. Yeah. And now it's like, okay, you've got three unknown entities. And so that's a concern, but then that's why I would go Pantemis. Once again, the resume is not much different than Hasal, but I just think that he has played a lot more games in the last few months that I think that's where I would go.
I think we can get into potential 11s for Belgium next week once that team is finalized. Fine. But there's a lot of interesting names to be chosen from. A lot of people we've talked about a bunch. One Chauanier going. That's all I ask. One Chauanier. I know it's not going to be my guy from Forge, but give me Mathieu Please.
There's no way.
Yeah. No way. Come on. All right. I was expecting a little humoring, but you just completely crushed it. Okay. The U.S. World Cup team also being announced soon. Be fascinating to see who's fit and not fit for that. I know in the midfield, there's some concerns regarding Weston McKennie, but obviously he'll be taken and they'll see how he feels.
Yeah.
Once they're situated. But yeah, that should be something.
Yeah, we'll get into this a little bit more, I think, next week. But yeah, there's once again injuries and how players are playing. There's going to be a big conversation on who's doing what and who's going to be playing. And that goalkeeper position for the United States, I think the one that's up for grabs. That I think everyone's choosing Matt Turner, but we'll see when push comes to shove.
Some Tim Ream conversations about him possibly starting. Tim Ream, who's been okay. He's been okay, but if it's not Zimmerman long, it'd be a surprise. And you know who's also been playing really damn well? Tyler Adams is leveling up.
Oh,
so that's timing out really well.
I know everyone's been big on him, and like it's David's not here to but Tyler Adams is an elite level player, and I think he just is about to get the recognition he deserves. Like once again, he was playing elite level football last year and then moved to Leeds because there's money there. But it's just like I think he's going to take that next step into your Chelseas, your Tottenhams, your bubble Champions League teams or Big Four teams. So it'll be interesting. But he's an incredible talent who covers so much space and it's just such a joy to watch because he's just never stops. Like 90th minute in a Leeds game and he is running around like he's a sub that just came on.
He's got that Red Bull gene. Phenomenal stuff from him. Jesse Marsch, we were saying Jesse Marsch probably wouldn't last till the break, but that win over Bournemouth might have just bought him enough time till the next game when they get licked by Leeds or by Tottenham and the conversation restarts.
Leeds have been interesting the last, since we had that conversation, we're like, I don't know if he's going to make it. Like he has 2 wins. He beat Liverpool. He beat Bournemouth. I think he's bought his time till
the Liverpool win. The Liverpool win is definitely, but even though it's not classic Liverpool, it's still Liverpool. So I think I'm with you. And the way they've done it as well, pretty entertaining stuff, what we expected. So long live the Marsch reign. Quickly, Sean, wrapping up. Sepp Blatter, I mentioned him off the top. He's back in the news. Okay, Sepp Blatter from the AP claiming that picking Qatar to host the World Cup was a mistake. Quote, It's a country that's too small. Football and the World Cup are too big for that. Qatar is the smallest host by size since the 1954 tournament in Switzerland. So he's saying it's a bad choice, but not for all of the reasons that we've been saying. Not any of the human rights issues, not any of the views on the LGBTQ plus community, none of that stuff. It's about logistics and infrastructure and shifting the blame to former French President Nicolas Sarkozy and his running mate Michel Platini for swaying key votes. So perfect Sepp Blatter cameo to be like, guys, it was a bad idea, but not for any of the reasons that we all agree on. It was too small. Qatar's too small.
It's just too small. Not enough people. Just on that note, I do worry. I have been worrying, but I don't think ticket sales have been going as well as we had assumed that they were going to. I think that they're starting to scramble and starting to fill seats. And as a Toronto FC season seat holder, we were getting emails.
You know this inside and out.
Yeah, a couple weeks ago. Because there's happened to have extra inventory in Qatar. And if TFC is getting these extra inventory seats, the world is getting these extra inventory seats. Oh, wow. So anyway, long story short, I think we're going to see some empty games coming up. And I just don't, once again, infrastructure, outside of all the bullshit reasons why Qatar shouldn't have it, I think infrastructure is playing a huge part because everyone was like, well, I can't get a hotel. It's going to cost me tens of thousands of dollars to get over there. I'm not going to go. And I think that it's finally coming to, and we're going to see half empty stadiums for a World Cup. I
talked to one person who's just going as a fan, and the way they laid out the logistics for them of going sounded hellacious and not super fun at all. Like a ton of travel, and you're staying in so many different places, and I don't think they have accommodations for the last game they have tickets to. So that's kind of the situation they're in. But I didn't know that. I didn't know TFC supporters are that's interesting. To say the least. Sepp's not wrong. He's not wrong about this. For once in his dang life, he's not wrong. But again, there's other stuff that we can highlight here. Finally, EA Sports has got every World Cup winner right since 2010 using FIFA simulations. 2010 Spain, 2014 Germany, 2018 France, 2022. Guess what they're calling SK? Argentina beating Brazil in the final 1-0. They're also saying Canada's not getting out of the group. Which is the more shocking to you?
They both hit home. Like, honestly, like, don't get me wrong. I wish Canada's going to get out of the group, but just the more that I've seen Belgium and Croatia play the last few months, it makes it harder and harder. But they still, I think that one is the one that could, but like Argentina, if I was to pick somebody, and I'm not giving away my picks for next week, but Argentina, I also, not only do I think that they can win it, I want them to win it outside of Canada, I think. I think that I would love to see the Messi story end that way, and I also think that they're just an incredible team that could go ahead and do that. And then also having Brazil in the final, that'd be great.
Be great. Also, in the simulation, Brazil beats Portugal on penalties in the semifinals, sparing us all from endless last dance, Ronaldo, Messi talks. Please, EA Sports, be right again. All right, that is it from our World Cup talk. Like we said, plenty more coming where that's from, especially next week once we have all the rosters finalized. When we come back to wrap up the show, it's the mailbag, Ask AFP. Welcome back to AFP. Before we get to the mailbag, a shout out to the one and only Nick Andrade, friend of AFP, in the Ring of Honor of AFP. That we're just creating. I know it's under construction, but autosave is back, part of the Soda Network. They're doing a new game, Gotham Knights. Sean, you are the Batman expert yourself. Who's your favorite Batman villain?
Oh gosh, once again, probably talking to a lot of people who aren't my age, but even this isn't beyond my age. I loved the Adam West Batman. And so when I'm talking about my favorite villains, I'm definitely leaning in that realm. But I loved the Mr. Freeze. I loved the Penguin, Riddler, the Joker for Adam West's was incredible. I believe, I'm trying to think who played him.
I got this. Who do you think it
Cesar
is?
Romero.
Cesar Romero? Yeah. You got it. Fantastic.
It just,
legend.
I know that everyone's talked about the great Jokers in time, but this is my Joker, and it just sort of sits in this kooky, fun, but evil, but just what I believe comics should be. Like gritty comics are exciting and fun, but I love the absurd and the over the top campiness of comics and all that. So I'm going to say Cesar Romero's Joker is my favorite. Who would be your favorite Batman villain? I
think I'm going to be maybe called into the recency bias trap, but I might pick Ra's al Ghul. I think he, especially portrayed by Liam Neeson in the movies, but also covered in this game, Gotham Knights, which Nick and Camille are going through. Ra's al Ghul had bravado, gravitas. You also were you know what? He's kind of right about some things, and he helped you, Batman. What's the deal, man? But is Batman a good guy? Other questions are raised. But to get back to autosave, it's basically a book club for video games, and Nick and Camille are Gotham's only hope. I really like the chemistry they have as co-hosts. SK, it's a great show if you're a video game fan or a comic book fan. In this case, and you're a Batman lifer, they go chapter by chapter in a month-long deep dive into the stories of some of the hottest games. And this month, it's Gotham Knights. Episode 2 dropped this week, where they ran into some classic Batman villains in Harley Quinn and the Penguin. Sean's picking the Joker. I'm picking Ra's al Ghul. how could you not pick Bane in some circumstances? Heath Ledger's Joker. So many more to choose from, but there's options here. I highly recommend it if you're a video game fan, if you're a Batman fan, to check out Autosave Gotham Knights. You won't regret it. Let's get into the mailbag, Sean.
Let's do it. And right, actually, for anyone who's on the Discord, put your favorite villain in the Discord. Right, I just love to know who you like.
Also, I'd also love to know, is Batman a hero? Is he a good guy? Let's talk about it.
Ooh, I'm into this. Now it's time for Ask AFP, where Devang and I will do our best to answer your questions. Mel asks first, World Cup teams are bringing 26 players to Qatar. If there were to be injuries, who's 27th for the Canadian men's national team and the U.S. men's national team? Devang, I'll let you go first on this one.
Am I legally not allowed to say David Choinière?
You can. I am good with you putting that one in there.
Great question from LS. Oh, it's tough. Oh, gosh. Josie Altidore.
Yes. Oh, yes. Let's go. Yeah, you stole mine. I don't know
or
if
Michael
he's going
Bradley. Or Michael Bradley, basically. I want one of those guys to be like, I'm back, baby. I'm going to support you guys.
So I am going to go with the U.S. men's national team. I'm going to pick two guys because I'm not sure if... no, he's probably not going to make it. But I'd love to see Jordi Mihailovic in the U.S. men's national team.
Yeah.
So that's one. And then for the Canadian men's national team, this is tough because, like, I think from player 30 to player 23 is up in a bubble right now. But I'm going to say 27. I would love to see defensive midfielder
Scott Arfield?
Liam Fraser.
Okay.
Liam
Fraser Hive is back. It's back.
I would love to see him. Once again, I have not watched him play.
They're going to take him anyways. They're going to take him anyways.
I hope so. Once again, I'm still living in that U.S. men's game where he just came in and just bossed.
Boston.
And I know that was years ago, but Liam is a good guy. I like what he brings. Obviously, he's not a steady hand in the most moments, but the way he can spray a ball from the back, I just think that he brings something that other players in our Canadian men's national team don't do, and it'd be nice to have a little extra help there. So those are my two. Moving on.
I back it.
Good. I appreciate it. TFC2 represent. So Jason G shared on the Discord how Vancouver FC will be joining the CPL next year, and even named Afshin Gotbi, apologies for the pronunciation, as their inaugural head coach. Devang, do you think this was a good move? He's got quite the resume.
I was going to say, I don't know too much about him until I kind of read up on where he's been and what he's done. And holy hell, I think he's been on every continent almost, but he's covered definitely North America and Asia quite well. Ton of experience in Iran as well, but in South Korea, in Japan, in California, in the school system, coached for UCLA, also involved in the United States setup. Ton of experience. Again, I don't know a lot about this guy. I'm not going to pretend I do. That being said, the resume says to me that this is someone who can adapt. Like, I don't think you go from coaching in the US to Iran to Japan to Thailand to China to Iran again and then back to China without being pretty adaptable. So I think that's an interesting sign and a positive sign. Once again, we'll see how it goes. I guess in the CPL, though, are there any comparisons, basically?
So yeah, Devang, I don't know if there's anyone with the same type of resume that he's had, but there is one coach that I would say sits in a similar situation, but that being said, like, doesn't really have the same resume. It's Michael Silbauer from Pacific. He came across from Denmark and had some experience, but once again, not the resume at this. Like, he coached the Iranian national team. He coached like S-Pulse. Like, these are like some big clubs. And once again, he only had a cup of tea at every place. And I find that always worrying when you look at a resume of a manager and you see that he's only really had 1 or 2 years or 2 or 3, Antonio Conte being one of them. So I don't expect it to be a long ride, but I think the connections that he may have, and I think that the tactics that he may have that might really elevate this team and the club, it'll be interesting. It's an experiment. Somebody without having the understanding of the Canadian Premier League and what's associated with it, it'll be interesting. I don't know enough about him. I don't know enough about what he brings to the table. But once again, probably the best resume that any Canadian or any CPL coach has ever had. I think the only other person that I would put in the same realm would be Stephen Hart.
I highly recommend checking out Charlie O'Connor-Clark's interview with going to be on campl.ca. The story, how he knows Rob Friend, is pretty hilarious. Like the story of how they met each other when Gotby was managing S-Pulse, and they were looking for a striker to get on the end of crosses in the box. And he remarked upon being offered up this player, he's like, "Oh, Friend, I must get to know him because that's a very unique last name." I love that a little tidbit. But it turns out Rob Friend, obviously working with Vancouver now, and it ends up being a small world and their paths crossing again, which is incredible. But in that interview, Rob Friend mentioning all of those things that we like, being around, being in different countries, but also working with translators, coaching players through translators, things like that, which I think maybe we take for granted when it comes to setting up a new team and adapting to all sorts of players that are going to be part of your club. I think in that sense, this makes a lot of sense, and we wish him luck.
Moving on, Mikey116 asks, how many teams is enough for Major League Soccer?
A great question. I was watching MLS Cup and they had Don Garbrandt at halftime, and Alexei Lalas, of course, asked this question and he stumbled a bit. I think he was a bit worried about who he was going to anger because they mentioned the other teams in the pipeline, like Las Vegas is very close, and he not threw Sacramento on the bus. He's like, Sacramento's still there, which didn't sound that nice. But if they stop it, they're not going to stop at 30 is my guess. He did say that they wanted to stop at 30, but I think 32 is what they'll stop at.
Yeah, I'm ready for them to stop, but understanding that what's the difference between this number and 32 is also meaningless. Like, I think we're at the point right now where there's so many teams that it's getting hard to sort of control the number or understand what the magical number is for sports. The one thing that I would say is that I'm also open to, and this is putting on my pro-rel hat, but I'm open to as many as MLS wants if they're willing to have a tiered system. But that's a bigger conversation for another day.
Yikes.
2 more questions before we head out. Jason G asked, elaborated by asking, once the league reaches their magic number, what then becomes the focus for the sport in North America? That's a tough one.
Oh, yeah. I want to say MLS Next Pro is kind of what it is, or like what the idea will be going forward, because once you reach maybe a saturation point in terms of clubs, it's about building the infrastructure underneath it, which kind of seems backwards, but that's kind of how things have happened. It's been somewhat organic and somewhat stop and start because of mistakes or learning experiences. So I think maybe providing some support for the scaffolding that props up this whole pyramid is the next step, and it's taking care of I think the USL infrastructure is better than it's ever been, but it took some real tough decisions, right? So perhaps that's the next step here.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that creating, once again, going back to my last comment about like pro-rel, but it's like, if you're not even going to do that, then it's like, okay, well, let's lift up the 16 to 20-year-old to be that sort of underneath pyramid. And it's like, and is it going to be more than just an academy level? Is it going to be a business? Is it going to be something that you sell tickets to? Is it going to go in different markets? Like, I think that there's a lot of those questions that have been sort of half-assed over the last few years, but seeing how MLS Next Pro has been like hiring and development and the league is growing, I think that conversation is going to happen. And I think the other focus that the league needs to continue on is, and it shifts a bit, is to eyeballs. You're moving to Apple TV. You're going to have to try to drive subscriptions and eyeballs to that product while also making partnerships in linear broadcast to make sure that the people in the big moments get to see the game. So I think television is still a huge focus even now, but I think especially once the quote unquote cash cow of expansion is done.
That 2.1 million number will be dancing in the executive's head for a long time as they seek to capitalize on the huge viewership.
Exactly. And last but not least, speaking of growth, Zach asks, with the CPL announcing the raise of minimum salary to $30,000, how much of an impact does this have on the league? Devang?
I mean, in this current climate, with inflation being what it is, trying to think of how do you live in like a big city off that? It's really tough. I mean, a raise is good to raise the minimum salary, but how much of an impact this will have? It's hard to measure that in this current climate because it doesn't feel like much, to be honest.
Yeah, I agree. It's obviously like, I think when you're talking about a 27-year-old making $30,000 is a non-starter. But I would say that, especially with the way that CPL has been building, we're probably talking about an 18 to 22-year-old that's making $30,000. And once again, in this climate, they probably can't afford their own place. But if you were to have three roommates, like 3 kids on the team who are 18 years old living together, like I think that, once again, I'm not saying it's the living wage. It's not.
Right.
But I think that we're getting closer to that. And I was saying this off air before, is that like we didn't get until 2013 into Major League Soccer till they were getting like $30,000 as a league minimum. So I'm not saying that it's good, because once again, we're both in Ontario where we were just having a strike over $39,000 and you can't live on it. I'm full stop. You can't live.
Yeah.
But I will say that the way that the CPL players are set, and the way that like they're still in university, or they go back and forth from university, or once again, they're supported by living at their parents' house or what have you, or living with multiple players. It's not right. But to get from like where they're probably making $16,000 and doubling, like we're getting closer. We're getting to a place. So it's going to have an impact. We just need to get themselves probably $15,000 higher in the future.
It's true. I mean, I'm putting myself in this, like if I'm my age and I'm making 30 grand as well, I'm like, well, I have to move. Yeah. I can't live here anymore at all. So yeah, but I know what you mean. And I think the other mechanisms there with like the club providing support for housing and in some cases, even food allowances, it's a positive step. I'll say that. But
yes,
more where that's coming from, hopefully. That's it. What a jam-packed show we had. Big thanks to everyone who submitted their questions. If you like this week's episode, please give us a rating or a review wherever you get this podcast. That'd be incredible. Plus, hit us up on Twitter @afootballpod, as well as on patreon.com/afootballpodcast. For Greg on the ones and twos, and for Zach and Sean, thank you so much for listening to AFP. We'll talk to you next week.